The committee will come to order. After recognizing myself and the ranking member, my good friend Mr. Berman of California, for 7 minutes each for our opening statement, I will recognize each member of the committee for 1 minute for their opening remarks. We will then hear from our witnesses, and I ask that you summarize your prepared statements in 5 minutes each before we move to the question and answers with members under the 5-minute rule. Without objection, the witnesses' prepared statements will be made a part of the record, and members may have 5 days to insert statements and questions for the record, subject to the length limitation in the rules. And we apologize if it looks like it's a sparsely attended hearing. We have the GOP caucus going on now, the Democratic caucus, and about 5 different committees having briefings and hearings as well. So it will slowly build up. And the chair now recognizes herself for 7 minutes. March 1st, 2011 marked the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the Peace Corps. We initially planned to hold this hearing in March, but postponed it to accommodate the many anniversary celebrations. Over 200,000 Americans have served in the Peace Corps. Today, there are over 8,000 Peace Corps volunteers serving in 77 countries. 300 of these volunteers are from the state of Florida, and 9 are from my own district. According to the Peace Corps' facts and figures, 60% of current Peace Corps volunteers are female, and the average age of a Peace Corps volunteer is just 28 years old. For half a century, Peace Corps volunteers have given their generous talents and skills to help the poor in developing countries, thereby increasing understanding between diverse cultures. For many, these Peace Corps volunteers serve as the only American faces to visit faraway places in distant lands, and volunteers should be proud of their accomplishments, as there are many to celebrate. In spite of these successes, it is time to examine how, after 50 years, the Peace Corps is faring. In particular, we must review how the Peace Corps, as an institution, has supported Peace Corps volunteers. Despite critical reports by its own Inspector General, the General Accountability Office, and prior congressional hearings, Peace Corps safety and security failures have been a recurrent problem with tragic consequences for thousands of volunteers. Some who seek to ignore those problems have asserted that volunteer service itself is inherently risky as an excuse for lax and ineffective safety and security measures. That attitude is unacceptable. Clearly, the conditions under which Peace Corps volunteers serve present unique challenges. Volunteers are often deployed to areas with restricted access to reliable communications, with limited or no police or medical services. Volunteers may have only a basic understanding of local language and culture, and may be viewed as relatively wealthy, becoming targets for criminal activity. According to an April 2010 audit report by the Peace Corps Inspector General, quote, if compared to public colleges and universities, the Peace Corps would rank first for the most robberies, second for the most burglaries, and 7th for the most aggravated assaults. Further, in comparison to crime statistics reported by countries around the world, Peace Corps volunteers experience higher rates of rape and burglary than any of the 86 countries that responded to the United Nations Crime Statistics Analysis, end quote. Historically, the media have downplayed the dangers of serving in the Peace Corps and have underreported and overlooked any criticism of the Peace Corps. Recently, this immunization has started to subside. In 2003, the Dayton Daily News released its 7-part series entitled Casualties of Peace. Former Dayton Daily News editor Jeffrey Bruce stated, quote, the extent of this safety problem has been disguised for decades, partly because the assaults occurred thousands of miles away, partly because Peace Corps has made little effort to publicize them, and partly because the agency deliberately kept people from finding out while emphasizing the positive aspects of the Peace Corps, end quote. Earlier this year, on January 14th, the ABC television news program 2020 exposed the Peace Corps failures regarding the reporting of sexual assault and rape, which spurred many victims to come forward about the mishandling of their cases. According to dozens of disturbing affidavits received by our committee, the Peace Corps' mishandling of rape and assault spans over 4 decades. Several of the affidavits are from volunteers currently serving in the Peace Corps. The affidavits received by the committee were obtained by First Response Action, a support group of volunteers who were victims of rape or assault. The affidavits establish 5 basic themes. Volunteers are generally inadequately trained on sexual assault issues. Volunteers are often placed in dangerous situations. The Peace Corps' in-country response often fails to meet survivors' needs. Upon return to the United States, survivors often receive hostile rather than supportive treatment. And lastly, institutional obstacles and often prevent survivors from receiving long-term medical and mental health care. Without objection, I would like to include these affidavits into the official record. At this time, I would also like to include, without objection, a statement from returned volunteers Chuck Ludlam and Paula Hershoff, who have been advocates for reform to address problems with the Peace Corps, including safety and security. And further, without objection, I would like to include for the record a statement from the Building Bridges Coalition, a consortium of 300 international volunteer organizations regarding Peace Corps safety and security. Finally, I will be handing Mr. Williams a letter from a constituent of mine who was serving in the Peace Corps but was recently terminated. I'm asking the Peace Corps to explain why it did not accommodate the medical concerns of this older volunteer. At our hearing today, 3 returned Peace Corps volunteers have made the difficult decision to testify about their traumatic experiences, and I commend them for their bravery and continued commitment to effect positive change in the Peace Corps. We will also hear from the mother of a Peace Corps volunteer who did not return home. Lois Posey will testify about her courageous daughter and how the Peace Corps failed Kate when she reported the rape and abuse of students for whom she cared so deeply. Following this testimony, we will hear from Peace Corps Director Aaron Williams, the Peace Corps Inspector General Kathy Bueller. Our goal is to find ways to address these problems so that future Peace Corps volunteers will not fear for their safety. And we are joined today, thank you, Senator Isaacson, from Georgia. We're joined by Senator Johnny Isaacson, whose constituent is Lois Posey. Senator Isaacson's presence is another indication of his commitment to securing justice for Lois's daughter, Kate, who was killed during her service as a Peace Corps volunteer in Benin, and I understand that you will be traveling there next week to get a further update on Kate's case.